Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation called All About Extensions. My name is Bill Marsland. I work for Ninja's education team. I'm here with my colleague, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. We're really excited to join you today. We're talking all about extensions today.
Yeah, so today we are going to share with you 4 of our favorite MakeCode Arcade extensions. In case you don't know what extensions are, and that's totally okay, extensions are add-ons or plugins for MakeCode Arcade that create new categories of blocks or code in the toolbox. So it's really cool that you can visit this separate screen, explore all these different extensions that are possible, and then bring them into your code. And we're going to demonstrate what that looks like, and then demonstrate some of our favorite ones, as I said. Extensions are really great to be used to customize gameplay, add on different UI UX features, and even add on some really cool special effects to your game. There's a bunch that have been created by the MakeCode Arcade team, but what's even cooler is that anyone can make an extension. You can share that extension and anyone can access it. And that is actually what Kiki is going to be talking about after our session today.
Great. So to add an extension, there's a couple different ways that you can go through it. There are some screenshots on this slide. You can either just select the extensions menu on the left side of those drawers that you can pull out. Alternatively, on the right side of the editor in the top right corner, there's that gear icon, which is the settings. And then you can click on extensions and it will open the same menu if you go through either of those methods. And then once you access that menu of extensions, you'll be able to scroll down to select different options. Alternatively, you can type in that search bar if there's a specific one that you're looking for. And again, Kiki will talk in the session following this one about how you can access custom extensions and create your own as well. All right, so as Bill mentioned, during our session today, we wanted to spend some time highlighting 4 of our favorite extensions that we've used in our curriculum at Code Ninjas. MakeCode Arcade has so many great extension options, but we really enjoy using the scroller, the status bar, the story, and the raycasting extensions. They really help bring what can be a simple project to life. We're going to discuss each extension in detail and showcase just a few blocks from each category that can be used to enhance a project. We'll have an example project that we'll share on the screen, as well as share with the link in the chat. There are some blocks that you can tinker with inside, so feel free to open that project link once we share it, or Bill is also going to demo it on the screen, so feel free to just watch along as well. All right. So the first extension that we wanted to showcase today is the scroller extension. This extension allows you to scroll or to loop through background images. And this is really helpful to create an animated scene in a project with relatively simple code. You can set the background image to only scroll in one direction, whether that's horizontally, vertically. You can set it to scroll at a given velocity, again, to kind of set which direction, how fast it's moving. And you can also set the scroll offset for the background image manually. Another cool part of this extension is that you can use it to create a parallax effect by scrolling multiple layers in a project at different speeds. In a moment, Bill is going to walk us through an example project where each background image is set to a specific layer. And then each layer scrolls at a different speed. So you'll see that this creates a really cool, just animated scene that, again, can just bring that project to life. There are a few other blocks that are included in the scroller extension, but here are just a few of our favorites. So with that, Bill, if you want to pull up the example project, and the link is on the screen, aka.ms/arcadecon-scroller, and you can pull it up at the same time if you're interested.
Yeah, so I am going to leave this slide right here to go to that project. So I hope you did grab that link, but again, we'll make these links available. You'll be able to grab them later on. But we have this project that we sort of decomposed the extension code. And so you'll be able to see the extension code sort of like exploded out on the screen. And we're just going to sort of walk through and drag it back in and show you how it works and how we use it in some of the projects in our curriculum at Code Ninjas. Just as soon as this project opens. There we go. So again, we've already preloaded the extension into the code here, and then we've given you some starter assets. So this is one of our favorite ones. where I'm just going to start off by setting these different images. So I'm going to set sky to the very background layer. So now it's going to appear on the screen. I am going to set the clouds to be a layer above. And I can actually start by just scrolling those clouds, and I can adjust that. I can make them move faster or slower. I can make them move in the opposite direction with a positive number here. I could even make them move up and down if I wanted to. So it's really fun to like play around with this. Also, I should point it out, just for the sake of the starter code, I started by just declaring all these background images as variables, but you could actually just drag them directly in here as well. It was just a little bit easier for the starter code to do it the way we set it up. Layer 2 is going to be some city images. So we're going to have this city background, and that will now appear on screen. And if I want to actually give the illusion of the city scrolling as well, I can make that scroll, and I just have it set to scroll at a -10, so just sort of like a small scroll as it goes across the screen. And then my last layer will just be some extra birds, and I'm going to have those birds also scroll just in the opposite direction. And let's see that. And we were envisioning this to be sort of like a Flappy Bird style game where the primary character here, the player character, can only move up and down, but it gives this illusion that it's behind birds and buildings and clouds that are all moving at different speeds, creating a really cool effect. And just adding like a subtle extra to this game. This is great for like adding on the UI UX. This is great for like having kids feel like, oh, like I've really made something very cool, when really it was just creating a simple background and then applying this scroller effect to the code. So we'll move on to our next one. Pass it back to Sarah.
Awesome. Another favorite extension of ours is the status bar extension. Like Bill just mentioned, it's great for really enhancing the UI in a project, and again, making that project come to life. As the name mentions, it's useful for adding status bars to sprites in a project. These status bars can communicate a certain value as it increases or decreases in a project, such as a sprite's health status. In the example project that we're going to show you, the player sprite must send burger sprites to the customer to decrease their hunger status. So there's a lot of just unique ways that you can integrate the status bars into projects. And the status bar is actually a sprite. So it must be created first, and then you'll do that by defining its width, its height, its kind. So you can set, again, what sort of status bar you're including in the project. You can assign each status bar a value and then change or retrieve that value when different events occur in a project, such as when it overlaps another sprite in a project. And then in order really for status bars to be really useful, you have to attach it to a sprite. Not always. Sometimes you might want to have a big status bar somewhere else in a project. I know in one of our curriculum projects, we have kind of a mini golf game, and the status bar increases and decreases based on when you're holding down the A button. So it doesn't always need to be attached to a sprite, but often that's a really useful piece of the status bar. And by attaching it to that sprite, it also allows you to then access the value of the status bar that is attached to that specific sprite. You can also customize the status bar by changing their field colors, their border, their position, and a lot more. Particularly for the status bar extension, we recommend using the documentation to learn more about each of these blocks, as sometimes they can be a little tricky to figure out on your own. And Bill's going to demo it in a moment, but you can access those resources if you go to the JavaScript tab, and you can select the function that you're looking for, and then there's a question mark where you can pull out the documentation for each block. So that's just really useful for learning what each block does, and then how that block or function can be used in the project. I'm going to pass it back to Bill, who's going to bring up the example project. And again, you can access it at aka.ms/arcadecon/statusbar.
Awesome. Give people a moment to get that, because thank you for adding that in the chat there, Ben. Yeah, you're definitely going to want to grab some of these projects. You're welcome to use any of these projects that you see here. Yeah, we're really excited about these projects and we love sharing them with other people, especially this one. As Sarah pointed out, we love the fact that we wanted to teach kids about using status bars, but we didn't just want to make a shooter game. So that's why we tried to spin it on the idea of, we're actually increasing from, instead of going from like green all the way to red, we're going from red to green as we are feeding these hungry customers and filling up their life. So I, again, have some exploded status bar code here on my screen. You can see this if you open up this project yourself. And when I play this project, sorry, it does seem to be taking a moment to load, but when I play this project, there's nothing, like the customers are coming towards me and I can use the A button to shoot projectiles that end up being burgers to these customers. But nothing actually happens until I put in this status bar code. Okay, doesn't seem to be loading at the moment. So, okay, over here in my on-game update every pick random milliseconds loop, I'm going to add this status bar code. So I'll do it one at a time. These are going to be, this loop is creating the customers. There we go. This loop is creating the customers that are going to regularly appear. And so in this loop, I'm going to actually add this code that creates this status bar. So it's going to attach it to every single customer that appears. But first now, it's just only showing up there. I actually need to attach the status bar to the customer sprite. And now each customer who appears has that status bar. And I'm going to say that I want the status bar to the maximum to be anywhere from 2 to 5, just to keep the game interesting. So some customers are going to require 2 hamburgers, some 3, some 4, and some 5, just to keep the game interesting. And then the status bar is going to fill with red as, I'm sorry, the status bar starts off red, so it's filled red, and the background is green. So the status bar decreases as I feed these customers. But I still have to set the rest of that code up in this overlap loop here, where I have our unsprite of kind food, that's the burgers, overlaps the other sprite of kind customer. So the other sprite, the food sprite, is first being destroyed. But then I want to make sure that I'm changing the status bar of the other sprite by -1. And then I've also just created this code so that if the status bar actually reaches 0, to then destroy that customer sprite, change the score by 1, and play a sound. So now I should have a complete working status bar game where I feed my customers. Again, some take more burgers than others, and that's okay. But if they reach the counter, I do lose a life. Sarah had mentioned seeing that seeing the documentation. So Sarah, you said we go to JavaScript for that. And when you go to status bar, this is the documentation you're talking about, correct, Sarah?
Yes, and you should be able to, it's kind of small on my end, but you should be able to click that question mark. Yep. And then the tab will just pop up. And it's really useful for just learning about what the block does. Again, you can see it both in blocks and in JavaScript. It gives you an example of how you might use it. So it's just a really helpful reference as you're exploring new extensions and new blocks to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Let's pass it back to our next extension.
Awesome. So like Bill mentioned, we really tried hard to create a variety of types of projects in our curriculum. We know that MakeCode is awesome for creating retro-style arcade games, but we really love the story extension because not only can you enhance those arcade games and add, a cutscene at the beginning of a project, but you can also create more story-driven projects. And so it just really allows for just that variety of types of projects to be created. The story extension allows you to display text on screen in a variety of ways. That might be coding a sprite to say a message, by printing the text to a specific coordinate, maybe within a custom box, either at the bottom or a different part of your screen. You might customize the color of the text. There's a lot of ways to kind of personalize what that message is. Another useful block that we really like in the story extension is the sprite, the move to XY block. If you're familiar with Scratch, one block that we often were missing was the, glide to this position block. And this is where it is. It's in the story extension. It's really useful if you're, again, using it as a cutscene, at the beginning of a game and explaining the premise, and you want sprites to move to a specific spot, or again, just in whatever kind of story-driven project you're creating. And then lastly, the story extension is also great for incorporating user input into a project. You can create custom menus in a project that a user can select from, as you can see on the screen, and we'll show you in a moment. And then use the user's response to make a decision in the project. The example project that we're going to show you is really cool. We tried to make a choose your own adventure project, really emphasizing the use of these custom menus where users can select what scene they want to go to next. So yeah, you can do just so many great things with the story extension. But yeah, with that, we're going to jump over to the example project. Again, you can access it at aka.ms/arcadecon-story. And thank you, Ben, for dropping that in the chat as well.
Awesome. When you get into the story project, it was much harder to explode the code, so I did leave it intact. But we can still take a look at those blocks that Sara talked about. Sara did reference probably one of our favorite blocks, which is the one that replicates the glide block. That is not actually used in this project, but we highly recommend you check it out because when we did make the transition ourselves from scratch to using MakeCode Arcade, that was a block we were missing, and we pretty regularly hear people ask about that block. So we often recommend the story extension just for the use of that block. But here, one of our favorite things is just this idea that you can print text anywhere on the screen and you can create that text box. We also love using the text sprite extension where text is actually used as a sprite. And I did use that extension in this project as well, though we're not specifically talking about that in this section. But it's great to just have this text on screen. Let me get rid of that. And it's also nice to have this idea of the player choices. So we had set this up. This project was talking a little bit more about the use of arrays. And so we have all of these text arrays, but you can actually just enter the text directly into these bubbles and have it show up on screen. Actually, what you're seeing on screen right now is an example of the text sprite. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Nope, I was wrong. This is actually just the regular one. But then you can see this menu here which says either climb the cat tree or eat breakfast. Those are being pulled directly from those arrays that we have set up in this line of code that I just have highlighted right there. But this is a great way to practice using conditionals as well, where one answer goes to one function scene or to call one function. And the other answer calls the scene of another function. And so it's really great to practice lots of different things with this story. Like I said, we were practicing arrays, we were practicing calling functions with different parameters. And yeah, the code, even looks maybe a little complex, but it was really simple to follow along with. And it follows a pretty regular format, which is also really great and convenient for kids. So again, not much to put back together in this project, but definitely take a look at this project, play around with it. Feel free to, tinker with this and make it your own. We'll go back to Sara for our final extension.
Yeah. So the last one we're going to talk about is the raycasting extension. We think this one maybe has the most wow factor of all the extensions that we've talked about, but it's a great way to change the user's perspective in a project. So with the raycasting extension, you can render a tile map into 2.5D and really bring sprites and tiles to life, as you can see in this image. The raycasting extension requires that you create a myself sprite, which kind of serves as the viewpoint for the raycasting render. You can update the position, the speed, the scale of the sprite as well. That toggle current view mode block is useful for changing the user's perspective, even within the same project. In the project example that we're going to show you, the user can toggle between the 2D and the 2.5D modes to identify different sprites in this museum heist project. The raycasting extension also allows you to set a sprite to jump with a certain height, with a certain speed and duration, and then move with a specific speed as well. And those blocks are helpful. They just build off the additional dimensions that are present in the raycasting view. But there's so many other blocks to explore in the raycasting extension besides just the ones that are on the screen. And similarly, the documentation is really helpful for this extension as well because there are so many different functions to learn about. But this is really just a really cool extension to play with. And again, just really makes those projects kind of come to life, literally. So yeah, let's jump into the example project. The link is in the chat. It's on the screen, aka.ms/arcadecon-raycasting.
Thanks. And I will point out before I leave this screen that these bottom 3 blocks are awesome blocks to use, but were not actually available when we were creating this curriculum project. In fact, only those first few blocks that Sarah showed were available. So it's been really great to see how this extension continues to be built out. We love that the MakeCode team is building them out, and there's lots of conversation on the forum specifically about this raycasting extension, where folks were first requesting it and then offering features once it was actually live. In a moment, you'll see this pop up. Oh, there we go. But yeah, actually just by adding in this 3D render, which is what the extension name looks like, but the raycast, just adding that and then setting the player to this myself sprite sets up everything that you need to have the raycasting live. This is definitely an opportunity where it's great to spend some time considering what your tile map looked like. We wanted to have our player sprite start on the outside of the tile map, and so that's why we just have all these blank tiles around, because it's also important to think about the backgrounds, because that background color will show. And we spent some time sort of playing around with what that looks like in our raycasted project here. But yeah, we have a key that's hidden somewhere outside of this museum, and then you have to use the key to enter the door, and then you're inside the museum where there's going to be some enemy sprites and some art artifact sprites that the museum heist, you're trying to steal those. So yeah, I was going to point out that we used an A button to be able to toggle the view if you want to, knowing that just for the plain tile map, we just want like a very basic background. But then when you are inside versus outside, we had different backgrounds for the game as well. So again, I didn't explode the code on this. I just sort of left it all intact, but you can explore to this bright green code. And yeah, it's just taking the game a moment to load. But as you can see, really, this is just sort of a basic project. We use basic code. It doesn't really require anything fancy to do this raycasting. It just took a little bit more on the design side to be intentional about where we left open space, where we put walls, like the actual tile map walls, and then yeah, how we formatted these backgrounds.
Bill, I was going to say, while the project
Yeah.
is loading, there's a comment in the chat that I agree. This extension is definitely a little bit more advanced. But Matthew says that some students download it and then decide they don't want it, and you can remove the extension in the JavaScript view. So I wonder if we want to show that quickly while the project is loading.
Yeah, I'd be happy to show that. So once you go to Explore, sorry, I switched over to the JavaScript view. I should also make a plug that at 1:30, Sarah and I are talking about the transition from blocks to JavaScript and how powerful it is for kids to switch back and forth. But that's in another half hour. If you scroll down in the Explorer mode, you can actually see the extension, and I don't want to do this, but I can actually just delete it right here, and it'll remove the extension and any blocks or functions used from that extension. Also, another good thing to do, and something I did when I was pulling up this project, is it's actually good to refresh the extension as well. I realized that the version of this project was using an older version of the raycasting extension, so before I made this link, I made sure to update the project. It does seem like maybe the project is loading. Awesome. So just to go in full screen, here is the outside of our museum, and you can see we have a backdrop that intentionally has like the night sky. There's the key right in front of me, but I made it so that if you press A, you can see what this tile map looks like. And I'm not sure if you can see, but that little teal square in the left corner, in the left side with the red directional arrow, that is the player sprite. That is that point of view. And so I can actually see where I'm going that way. But then if I hit A again, I can go back to navigating in raycasted mode. So let me grab that key. I got it. Let's go back to the museum entrance. I know we're running short on time, but let's get inside that museum. There we go. There's the entrance. And then let's go inside. And here we go. I changed the backdrop again, so that way it looks more like the inside of a building and no longer the night sky. but I can see where my security guards are. I can see where the artifacts are that I'm trying to collect. Of course, it's so much more fun in raycasting mode. So yeah, this really was simple. It was just using a tile map and using a background intentionally, but it's really cool how the extension does all of that work for you. So let's return to our presentation. We just wanted to share a couple more of the extensions that we really love at Code Ninjas, and just Sarah and I ourselves. Arcade Minimap is a really fun extension that, again, adds that extra layer of bringing a game to life, especially because a lot of the games that kids play will often have a minimap in the upper corner. So I just included a project here where there's a really large tile map maze, and it's awesome to have that minimap because you can even drop mini versions of the player sprite and any enemy sprites or goal sprites or collectible sprites on that minimap, which is just such a cool feature. And kids love that. And it really makes the game feel professional and real. We also love the arcade tile util, just some extra tile map blocks, especially the ones where you can just cover a tile, which is like a temporary thing, especially if you're like switching between tile maps often. It's nice to just have a cover instead of replacing a placeholder tile. I mentioned earlier the arcade text is a really cool extension where you're actually creating text sprites. You can change the font a little bit, you can change the size, tweak the color. That's just a really cool way to get text on screen that's not in those dialog boxes or splash screens that are just part of the initial toolbox. And then one final extension our students love are the timer extension because it allows you to add in throttle, which means that you can't just spam press the A key if you're sending out projectiles, but you can actually add in some of that throttle or even have a little bit more control on when things appear on screen without just using those pause buttons. So yeah, let's go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, I know that was a crash course in extensions and we only got to showcase a few of them, but just had a couple reflection questions before we close for our session. So thinking about all of those examples, how might you introduce your students to extensions? I know there were a lot of comments. It seems like people are already familiar with a few of these, but if you're new to extensions or new to any of these, how might you go about introducing them to your students? And what might you create or add on to a game using some of these extensions? Feel free to share any ideas in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts on those. Thank you all again for joining us today. We hope you learned something new about extensions and are excited to bring them back to your classrooms.